Right, before we get started, PDP part 10 that I did a couple of weeks ago and the relocation of the ignition switch. Now, quite rightly so, I got a bit of a telling off over this one, so let me try to explain myself. Now, in order to relocate the ignition switch to the frame down tube, it involves basically turning the ignition switch upside down. This means that the ignition switch electrics are left vulnerable to water ingress by water coming down the lead and into the actual ignition switch. Now, I did very much have in my mind while I was filming this that I needed to cover that, but then, as so often happens, I completely forgot about it, and I am sorry. Now, there are various suggested fixes for this little problem, which is only a little problem, using everything from silicone sealer to electrical tape. Personally, for me, silicone sealer is a no-no. This is not the place for a material like that for waterproofing. And my preferred method for a job like this is the self-amalgamating tape, which is, after all, specifically designed for this type of task. I simply took a 3 or 4 inch length of it, and then starting on the actual body of the ignition switch itself to ensure that I got a good seal right up through the cable, I tightly wound it about 1 inch, 2 inches up onto the cable. I know this stuff well. It will last for years, yet if you do need to get it off for any maintenance, it's a 2-minute job just to unwind it. Once again, my apologies, I will try harder. So, on to Payday Projects Part 11. I do now have the fork oil for the strip down and oil replacement on the front forks of the T100, but unfortunately it didn't quite arrive on time. So I had to do some quick thinking and have a look to see if there was anything that I could do to progress this part of the project that wouldn't get in the way of the fork strip down later on. And so what I decided to do was fit the motone brushed indicators to the front. This is something that has been bugging me since I did the ones at the back. I hate the stock indicators, and I was determined that in this particular episode they were going to go no matter what. And I also fitted the Motone Customs lay flat dash, which basically brings your clocks down a little bit more horizontally, lower down. This didn't quite work because the headlamp was in the way, although that is going to be addressed in the next episode. If you want to fit these with the standard headlamp bracket setup, I believe Motone are looking at producing some spacers to accommodate this, or you could just use some suitable washers just to pack it out so that you've got some space between the bottom of the clock binnacle and the top of the headlamp bowl. It's a shame really, because there are only millimetres in it. Now, in the last episode we relocated the voltage rectifier, which left behind 2 rather ugly threaded holes on the bottom yoke. Now, Motone Customs have released an alternative front indicator mounting bracket for exactly this situation, and it can be used as a standalone solution in a situation like I have here, or it can be used in conjunction with the rectifier if you haven't relocated it. It's a very simple bracket which has been CNC machined from aircraft grade aluminium, and it is a really neat solution to tidy up this area after you've relocated the rectifier. Now, I should mention that I'm not really sure whether there is a right way up or a wrong way up with this bracket, but as far as I'm aware, I actually installed it upside down. And the reason for that was to get the wiring and other gubbins up out of the way as close underneath the headlamp bowl as I could for a neater look. Although on reflection, I think it probably would have looked just as good if I'd put it on right way up. Now, this bracket comes complete with 2 stainless steel bolts which just thread straight into your bottom steering yoke, and once you've got it fastened in place, it's probably a good time to unfasten those hideous Triumph indicators. There's no need to disturb the headlamp brackets, there is just room to get an open-ended spanner in there to undo the nut that holds them in place. Just leave them hanging for now, and that'll help you trace the wires into the headlamp bowl so that when it comes comes to wiring up your motone indicators, you don't get your wires crossed. Next step is to fasten your motone indicators in place and just leave the wires dangling for now while you unfasten your headlamp lens and make it safe. It's an idea to put some toweling or something on top of your front fender just to rest the lens on so that it doesn't get damaged. Now, it doesn't matter which indicator you wire up first, that's entirely up to you. Just trace the wire from your chosen indicator into the headlamp bowl and unfasten the two factory connectors that hold the two pieces of wiring together. Now, it's entirely up to you which way you do it. I chose to use some bullet connectors because I've got hundreds of them. Plus, it removes some of what is an awful lot of bulky wiring and connectors from inside the headlamp bowl, because as you'll know if you've ever been inside there, it is just a mass of wires. Now, I think you're looking at £3 or £4 for a pack of 100 decent quality bullet connectors from somewhere like Amazon, and everyone should really have a crimping tool as part of their garage equipment. It's absolutely indispensable when you're doing a project like this. Again, you can pick them up on Amazon for £5 or £6. It's not a huge expense. Now, you'll probably find once you've disconnected your factory indicators that the amount of wiring loom that is actually left inside your headlamp bowl is minimal, and you will struggle to get a crimping tool on them to actually do the work that you need to carry out. The best solution to this is to pull the harness back out through the rear of the headlamp bowl, which gives you enough slack so that you can actually work on it comfortably. If you're doing it the same way that I did it, snip your two factory connectors off, strip your wires and get them ready to receive your bullet connector. Then go ahead and crimp your two female bullet connectors in place. Once you're happy that that job's a good one, insert it back through the rear of your headlamp bowl back into your headlamp bowl. Your motone indicators do come equipped with the male bullet connectors, but I found they were just a little bit too loose on the bullet connectors that I have in stock. So again, I just snipped these off and replaced them with male bullet connectors from my stock. Now, once you've done that, thread the wires for your new indicators through the back of the headlamp bowl and just apply a little bit of white spray grease onto all your connectors before actually connecting them up, and this will stop them from corroding. This is quite a damp environment even inside the headlamp bowl, and it just stops them from corroding up over time and protects them against the elements. What I always like to do as well in this situation is place some heat shrink over the connections once they've been made and shrink it down tightly over your bullet connectors. This just reinforces the connection and stops them from being pulled apart with wear and tear. Also, before you thread your wires through into your headlamp bowl, it's a good idea to put some heat shrink over the threads on the motone indicators just to take the eye off them so that they're not as noticeable. Again, it's just making a nice neat job of it. When you've got both sides done, just check to make sure that both indicators are working correctly. It's then time to rearrange all the cables inside the headlamp bowl, get everything as it should be, and replace your headlamp lens. Now, your lay flat dash is actually a very simple and straightforward job to do. Just start by unfastening the domed nuts on the bottom of the binnacles. Then when you've got those off, just remove the plastic binnacles and put them somewhere safe. Once you've done that, at the bottom of each of your instruments there's a plug. Simply unplug it and both instruments will lift out, so you're just left with your mounting bracket and the rubber inserts that support your instruments. Take the rubber inserts out, they only go in one way. You'll find that your motone lay flat dash has exactly the same cutouts in them, so simply replace the rubber mounting onto the motone lay flat dash. It's then time to unfasten the existing Triumph mounting bracket. This is done by means of the 4 bolts that hold it on just in front of the handlebars, and once you've got it off, simply replace it with the motone lay flat dash. Now if you're using the motone headlamp brackets, you'll need to drop the headlamp down slightly to accommodate the lower position. But if you're retaining the factory brackets, you'll need to pack it out underneath there with some appropriate sized washers so that the bottom of the binnacles can clear the headlamp bowl. Once you've got it fastened in place, it's simply a matter of the reverse procedure of what you've already done. So replace your clocks, make sure that they're seated properly and that you've got your connectors back in, and then replace the binnacles. Now I will have to remove the washers from underneath the lay flat dash after the forks have been done and we've lowered the headlamp. Also, this method of mounting the front indicators wasn't actually the intended end result. I do have some clamps that clamp onto the fork stanchions from motone which were intended for this job. And it could be that before the build is completed, we will be removing this indicator bracket and replacing it with the motone stanchion clamps. Although I do have to say I really like the way it looks in this form. I think it gives the bike a much sort of meaner, purposeful look. And it's amazing how just removing those Mickey Mouse factory indicators and dropping the clocks down by 1 inch or 2 has completely transformed the look of the bike from the front. So coming up in the next couple of episodes, we're definitely going to get the forks done. We'll be getting those motone headlamp brackets on, and we're also going to be replacing the handlebars with motone's Jota style adjustable handlebars. And I'm really looking forward to getting that bit completed. I will, as always, leave a link for these items that I've used in the description down below for those of you that would like to have a look. Once again, thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful and that you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I will be back on Friday, so until then, ride safely and I'll see you soon.